Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Viva Bastardo Show, which is a part of the Hagerty podcast network. Today we have Ben Clymer with us, who is the founder of Hodinkee, the watch website. We're going to be talking about all sorts of fascinating, mesmerizing things like his collection of unrestored cars, Ferrari 330 GTC, BMW M1, Alfa SZ. I don't know why I gave Alfa this weird Italian accent. Also golf. Also watches, also his extraordinary sleep habits. I'm delighted to welcome my friend Ben Clymer to the show. Ben started a small website called, really a blog, called more of a Tumblr, called Hodinkee, which I think would not be crazy to say that your website and Hodinkee itself has sort of changed the nature of watch collecting as a whole. Don't you think? Just say yes.
Sure. Let's go with that. I'm going to take it. From you, a compliment I'll take.
It's so rare. It's so rare.
It really is.
But we should also talk about... so thanks you so much for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Truly.
We met, and I was considering bringing my bank manager in here because you are responsible for emptying out my bank account for the last 7 years. Because when we met, I was not interested in watches at all. Correct. I was a vintage car person, and we met because I sold you.
What did you sell me?
I sold you a perfect condition Lancia Flaminia Sport Zagato.
And where's that car now?
But that's how we met. You and I don't even remember. So you bought the car, and then we became friends, but I don't even remember.
Friends, enemies, whatever.
Ish. Yeah. I say friends in a loose term. And then, you kind of introduced me, but there was no kind of, oh, Phil, look at this watch or look at that watch. Somehow I ended up being sucked into the vortex of watches. That's just something that happens with you?
Yeah, I mean, those that spend any considerable amount of time around me are going to experience watches in one way or another. It is what it is. And so, our interaction is not totally uncommon for me. We were introduced by Bradley Price, I think, or maybe Santo, who's a wonderful mechanic in the area.
I think Bradley, because he had said, oh, a friend of mine might be interested in your car.
Right. Yeah, I was looking, should we talk about cars?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was looking.
You have a passing interest in cars.
Passing interest in cars. I was looking at a Maserati 3500 touring body, which I thought was just like one of the most beautiful cars in the world. And then Bradley Price and Santo said, you should look at a Lancia Flaminia touring body, which is effectively really the same car. And then say, oh, we actually know this fucking guy.
This guy.
Who has a Zagato-bodied Flaminia, and it's local, and it's pretty good. It's not great, but pretty good.
It's an extraordinary example.
You should go check it out. And that's how we met.
Yeah, he's very trustworthy. And then you just beat me down. I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't I give it to you in the end?
You basically gave it to me.
Yeah, I think
it was a gift. It was a friendship gift.
Wait, did you trade watch and car here? Like, was there?
No, because I wasn't into.
You had no watches at the time, or very few watches.
Now, come now, sir. I had a '95 Speedmaster.
Right. And what's the story with that watch?
That was the first watch I bought myself when I was in advertising, and I had some money, and I thought I'm going to go down into 47th Street, and I bought this watch new. Right. And that was the first kind of real watch I had, other than the Timex digital watch from 1977 that I still have. So, yeah, and then I disappeared down a wormhole of watches. But I'm very interested in I want to talk a little bit about Hodinkee.
Sure.
And first of all, the name, I'm sure people always ask you where the name came from. I know it's Hungarian or something. Is that right?
Czech, yeah.
But I'm interested in the process of that. Like, how did you decide, oh, this name sounds good? Because I'm sure that when you said it's going to be called this, so many people said, what's wrong with watch my wrist? Or all sorts of wrist, like hairdresser wrist puns.
To be clear, nobody said that because I didn't tell anybody about it, because this wasn't intended to be a business. Like, this was a fun project for me to bide my time while I was working in a very, very boring job at a bank here in New York. Right. And this was 2008, 2009. I was 25 years old. And then Lehman Brothers collapsed, right? And so then like the world's financial systems just basically imploded. And I just wanted to do something else entirely. So I didn't give Hodinkee a second thought because I didn't think it would be anything at all. Like, it was just a fun little project for me.
Why that word?
Sure. So I Googled. So the one thing I knew about the watch industry, which I didn't even really understand back then, that I certainly do now, is that the digital space and the luxury world, the relationship was tenuous at best. I mean, really at best. And back then it was crazy. I mean, it was really adversarial. And so all the websites that were watchworld.com or mywrist.com or whatever, they were gray market dealers. And what I mean by that is non-authorized authorized resellers of watches. And I knew that the luxury folks really hated that, and they still do. And so I wanted to create a website that was lighthearted, goofy. Like I tend to take a very, like, even though we're writing about expensive watches, like I take kind of like what I call like a middle class mindset towards everything. I don't come from a world of luxury, so I wanted something that was almost self-deprecating. And like we built a business with a name that's pretty fucking weird, pretty goofy. Right. And it took a while for the Swiss to kind of understand what this thing was and how it was different than like the Rob Report, which is like takes itself so seriously. And I know those guys, they're friends, whatever, but it's just a different thing. And so, nobody pushed back because there was nobody there to push back. I didn't tell anybody about it. It was just fun.
But how were you aware of this adversarial relationship? That's interesting because, I mean, how do you know that existed?
Yeah. So I knew basically that, like, if I went to World of Watches, which I don't even know if it's still a thing, but like Luxury Bazaar, which was kind of like the big gray market dealer and still is, those guys I knew were saying, okay, buy your Rolex at 40% off or 30% off, which is unheard of today, obviously. And I just knew that, like, that didn't feel right to me. And like, for whatever it's worth, even though we're kind of like a disruptor in this space, like I want to do things the right way.
Sure.
And for me, it was about being accepted by the Swiss, being accepted by the European kind of traditional conservative mindset of luxury, instead of kind of flying in the face of it. And those guys, the gray market guys, really do and did fly in the face of the traditional luxury consumer. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be part of the gang, really.
That's not dissimilar to our friendship, actually. You always want to be accepted by the traditional European face of luxury.
You are wearing cashmere today. Turtleneck.
Yeah, which is shocking because normally you are fully head to toe, underpants, socks, cashmere.
Generally speaking, that's accurate. Yeah,
it's good because the skin condition.
No, it's like, I mean, Hodinkee, I've told the story ad nauseum, but I'll tell it one more time. Like, the idea was really just for me to become a better writer. I applied to journalism school. I was writing for Forbes, actually, with our friend Hannah Elliott. Yeah. She was editing a book blog, truly, at Forbes back then. I was writing for AskMen.com, GQ, Financial Times, How to Spend It. I just wanted to become a better writer. And the one kind of like limitless kind of source here was watches, because nobody was really writing about it.
So at what point what was the point in Hodinkee's ascent where you thought, this is turning into something?
Yeah,
because there must be a point where someone goes, well, you suddenly realize, all these people are paying attention.
Yeah. It was early days. It was when a brand wanted to advertise with us, and they were like, "Hey, we'll pay you $2,500 a year to run a banner next to your content." And I was like, "Look, I'm going to be doing this anyway. Like, I might as well make this money." And then shortly thereafter, a bigger brand called Audemars Piguet, Francois, who's the global CEO, used to be the U.S. CEO, and he was kind of an early believer in what we were doing. He said, "Can we?" He didn't say, "Can we?" Like, he offered to advertise on Hodinkee, and that deal was, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to say $20,000 for the year, something like that. Right. But like that paid for my life for at least half of the year, if not more. Paid for my rent, certainly. And so then I was like, okay, we have something here. And then when I was in journalism school, my professors, Hodinkee started to get a lot of press because I was young and talking about things that like nobody was really talking about at the time, vintage watches, which nobody gave a shit about back then, that scale. I was in the New York Times, and one of my journalism professors said, "Was that you in the New York Times?" And I said, "Yes." And so they started to kind of like understand that this could be a real business. And it was at Columbia where I began to realize like this, in fact, was a real business. And so when all of my classmates were looking for desk jobs at CNN and the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and frankly not getting them because those jobs don't exist in journalism anymore, I was like, I think I have a job, and it's a pretty fucking fun one, and it's mine.
Right.
And so at Columbia, I met Will Holloway, who who's still with us, super talented videographer, and then Steven, who was with us as well. Hired both those guys full time. You're smiling right now. I don't know why.
Just happy to see you. I'm just.
And so we hired those two guys, and then kind of went off to the races, and now here we are.
I mean, I have to say, it's been a real joy to see this. The last 7 years, the ascent has been kind of extraordinary, and particularly the LVMH involvement.
Sure.
I mean, that's sort of the papal wave. It doesn't really get much better than that in the luxury world, I would imagine. Yeah,
and I think, LVMH is a minority shareholder in our company, a minority investor, but I think having that big brother or that type of suggestion that like we're onto something in that meaningful of a way. I mean, they own 70 of the greatest brands on the planet. What meant a lot to us for sure. And I think I've gotten to know some of the Arnault children over the years. Some of them have bought watches from us, etc. And it was super meaningful for sure. I mean, I think that in some ways it was validation as like a kid from upstate New York. Like that's a big deal to have LVMH
from the streets.
Yeah, exactly, from the streets. Mean streets of Brighton, New York.
That's right.
But they're a great partner, and I think we have lots of other investors that are more involved in other ways for sure. But having them involved is meaningful, no question about it.
Well, in the luxury space,
they're everything.
That is. Has that enabled you? Has that affiliation opened doors that might not have, or not really?
Not really, to be honest with you. I mean, I have never asked anyone for anything, truly, and I think like that is how
I mean,
except for you,
you're always asking me for things, man. I mean, I'm sure that your affiliation with me has opened many doors,
several doors.
I mean, I think
to the mechanic,
that really, that I feel like that our friendship probably opened the door for LVMH
most likely
investment. I mean, I don't want to take credit for it.
Well, there is a Toledano somewhere high up in French luxury, is there not?
Yeah, well, my family, my cousin Ralph Toledano ran Karl Lagerfeld and Celine, and then Sydney Toledano.
Right.
I feel like I'm not sure if we're related, but I'm going to say we are, just in case, I mean, just to cover my bases.
Wait, did you do the American accent thing on Celine?
No, I did French accent, Céline.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, just want to check. I mean, I can do I could do multiple accents, if you want. I could do this whole thing in an American accent. Actually, I can't. But so we at 2015, you and I started 2 different arcs of collecting.
Correct.
I went in the toilet with all sorts of weird watches, but but actually, for cars, man, it's been amazing to see how you've grown from the extraordinarily mundane. No, you've developed your own particular niche.
Yeah,
you found, and it's such a Clymer niche.
It is.
Do you want to tell everyone what it?
Sure. Well, I mean, like I think the arc, which I appreciate you acknowledging here, it really did begin with the Flaminia that I bought from you, and that it's a coach-built car. It's a Zagato body car, which is just extraordinarily rare and quirky and weird. And that I started to realize how much more special cars like that were coach-built, like literally hand hammered in aluminum, than say a vintage Porsche, which I also love. And at the time, I had a 356 that was just a restored
green one.
The green one, yeah, it was cool. And so that got me interested in Zagato-bodied cars and just kind of coach-built cars. And then from there, that car very quickly led into an unrestored Alfa Romeo Zagato, which I think is still probably the best thing I own, or one of the best things I own. And that car happened to be unrestored. And it had, it basically sat in a garage in Queens, of all places, from like 1968 to 2015. And that just got me hooked on finding unrestored cars. And so that is now my great love.
Well, for people who don't know, finding unrestored cars is kind of miraculous because these are things, we're talking about things that are 50, 60 years old and or older. And almost everything, so much has been touched at this point.
Of course.
I mean, so you got the Ferrari 330 GT? GTC, that's right. Mm-hmm. Now, first of all, the spec just makes me deeply depressed. The whole thing, the whole thing. In fact, by the end of this podcast, I will be sobbing with sadness, not joy. But it's grey, it's beautiful dark grey, red interior.
Correct.
And original paint. And what's the story? It was the garage.
So it sat in a garage owned by a gentleman named Francesco Corbi, who actually sadly just passed away 2 weeks ago.
I feel like you could have given a little more with the accent there.
Francesco. Yeah. So he owned the car from 1971 till when I bought it last year. He was just kind of a gentleman that lived in Rome, and his family was in some sort of industrial thing, and he bought the car from his friend only to drive to his house in Spain because it's
as you do,
yeah.
Right.
It's a real GT, so he'd throw his suitcase in the back and just cruise down to Spain.
Right.
And then it became expensive and et cetera, and he just put it away, and he put it away in around 1974, had it serviced once in 78, and then didn't touch it until last year.
You see, that's fascinating to me, the idea, because if it was me, I'd sell it.
Of course.
But the idea that you would have this thing and then you would I would feel so terrible going down to the garage. You just see it there, and I would feel like it would be just sort of generating these recriminating vibes towards me for not driving it, if that makes any sense.
I feel the exact same way, but in Italy, it's very different. And you often find Ferraris and Alfas sitting in warehouses and garages in Italy, and it's just a different kind of mindset. And they said, like, he felt that this car was part of his history, and he thought maybe someday one of his children might want it.
I see.
It became very expensive, obviously. And then, when he decided to sell it, he owned the car for 50 years, so last year, 2021. And then he just wanted it to go to a good home, and then a mutual friend connected us. And to be clear, the motor was in pieces because he thought in 2015 or so that he might want to restore it and get it back on the road. And then he got the quote for the engine rebuilding. He's like, fuck that. No way,
Right.
But to be clear, he had a garage that was not affixed to his house, down the road. So he didn't see it every day.
Right.
And I do think had he seen it every day, he would have been tempted to kind of get it back on the road or sell it back then.
Right.
I think he's really happy that he waited, honestly. And those
Well,
cars,
I'm sure he was happy that he waited, for sure.
but it's a car I'd always wanted. And Ferraris, as you know, and as we all know, like most of them have been restored. Most of them have been kind of tarted up, and just it's not an easy car to find with any amount of character or charm because they're the least expensive V12s. Like they're the car that a lot of guys start with when they get into series Ferraris. And so because of that, they were bought and they were restored and they were painted red. And so this car with original
and they always
paint,
have that terrible like overstuffed
the puffy,
the upholstery. I hate it.
Me
It's
too.
It's just sort of bulging out. And
it's terrible.
Yeah, it's awful.
I mean, it makes it look like this is Connolly leather, hand stitched, the whole thing back then. It makes it look cheap, and like it's very hard to do on a handmade Ferrari, but somehow people have done it.
Right.
So finding this car, 330 GTC, in unrestored original condition, is amazing. And what's even more incredible about it is that it's got the original chassis sticker on the mirror from the factory.
Right.
It's got his last registration, which was 1973 or 74, on the window. His last insurance sticker on the window.
It's got a Panini in the glove box from 72, untouched. It has original Panini.
It has cigarette burns all over it.
Does it really?
Truly.
Oh,
it's
so
amazing.
Great. That's
it's
fantastic.
just an incredible car. It really is.
And then also, can we talk about the most recent?
Sure.
Okay, so I think a few years ago you drove my M1.
Life-changing.
It is life-changing, isn't it? It was life-changing for me.
Yeah.
And then you made me exceedingly lowball offer right thereafter. You got
an all-cash offer. Yeah.
An all-cash offer in the single digits.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fair to say you've been sort of interested in one ever since, right?
No question.
You...
Yeah,
I mean, it just blows my mind, man. That these things just wash up on the shore of Clymer
something
Beach.
Like that.
Like some people root around for decades trying to find these things. They just ring the doorbell of your house and go, "Hey, what about me?"
Well, to be clear, I spend an inordinate amount of time searching for these things. I truly do. Like in the forums, I go on Italian forums all the time.
Do you speak Italian?
No. Do you?
No, but I can say words in Italian style. But so
that counts.
So do you use Google Translate?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. It's so easy. And on those forums, I didn't find the Ferrari on the Italian forum, but I found parts for my Alfa on Italian forums for sure. So yeah, the M1, which yours was the first that I drove. It was a revelation, because it's a real supercar, but incredibly easy to drive. And like the way that I look at vintage cars is, if I were around and of means in that day, would I buy that car new? And like my 67S, which is the super version of the 911, like I would have bought that car new. And I look at things that if I could have afforded, I would have bought. And the M1 to me is like a gentleman's supercar. It's not an F40, which is fucking bananas. It's not even a 959, which is almost like a little bit too tame in some way, although I love it. It really is exotic, but completely manageable. And it's a BMW.
I feel like it was the sort of the NSX before the NSX.
Yeah.
You know how people always talk about, the NSX
the
was
first
the first?
drive.
Yeah. I think the M1 was that car.
I completely agree. And that car is so easy to just drive around town and get in and out of, not like your XJ220. But I mean,
you will be featured
I can't
on
wait.
Friends getting out of the 220.
So Price texted me, he's like, whatever you do not let film let him film that. So the M1 is just a really compelling car because I've wanted an air quote supercar, but I'm not an F40 guy and I couldn't afford it. And the 959 also is kind of getting up there. And the M1 to me is a real supercar that is so weird. How is this a BMW? Like, it just should not be a BMW. But by the fact that it is, it's not a Ferrari, even though it's a Lamborghini design, obviously, or
Intel design,
right? Exactly. But it's one of those cars that I just wanted. But they're so hard to find. There were only 450 made.
Sure.
And so many of them have been just destroyed over the years because they weren't that expensive. Like when you bought yours, do you remember how much you paid?
I do.
Was it a lot or a little?
Well, that's a contextual thing. Let's just
compared to I don't know, how many watermelons could you get for it?
Then, I mean, let's say it was like the high. It was mid, 165-ish. Not to give a precise number, 165.99.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was, they were, and that was considered, I mean, I remember when they were low hundreds.
Right.
They were, I mean, yeah, they were.
It's not a Ferrari, it's not a Porsche. It's just a weird thing. And like BMW guys tend to can kind of tap out at a certain number. minus the 507 and some very, very
Right.
special stuff like that. And so the average BMW guy is not ascending to buy an M1 or a 507. This is a Ferrari buyer. This is like a very high-end 911 buyer. And they are just really special things. And so I'd been looking since I drove your car. But again, like me being me, like I'm a pretty conservative guy. I didn't want red or orange, which most of them are.
Thanks a lot.
What color is yours again?
Orange.
Well, original paint or no?
It is original paint. You know what though? You know what kills me? Because I actually think the first. Wait, okay, sorry. Go on.
No, please.
Well, the first when I went down, I had gone down to buy a Mangusta. And I drove it for 2 minutes. Thought this is the worst fucking car I've ever driven in my entire life. I'd rather eat my own balls than drive this car any further.
Sure.
So then, as one does. So then he had two M1s. He had a black one,
of which there are like 3.
I know, and he had a blue one.
Mhm.
And I was like, I can't remember what he was asking for the black one. But that's crazy. Spend that much money for just a black
color,
one.
yeah.
So I drove the blue one, changed my mind, couldn't agree on a deal, and I ended up with an orange one. But the blue one, I think that the blue, white, and then there's a couple in gray, I think.
There's 2 or 3 in gray.
Those colors are the best.
Yeah.
So you found a blue one.
I found a blue one. I had always
repainted on spinners,
exactly.
ground effects, subwoofer.
You done?
Yeah.
Okay.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah. So, blue was always the color that had I found a gray one or a black one, like those sell for multiples on normal M1. So,
Sure.
that's kind of out of the question. So I found a blue car that was owned by,
See,
should we tell the whole story?
You should tell the whole story, man.
Wait, do you want to guess who it? You already know who it is?
I know who it is.
Do you want to guess who it is?
It's
Elton John.
Pretty close.
It's a musician.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's my only guess.
Okay,
Oh.
so we're done with the guessing. It was owned by a guy named Roger Waters from Pink Floyd.
Oh,
He was in the pub band, small garage band called Pink Floyd.
minor character.
Yeah.
Right. So through a good friend of both of ours, I ended up coming in contact with Roger, and Roger ended up being just like this amazingly nice guy who bought the car new in 1980. He basically, the story is the wall had done really well, and somebody said it was better than a Ferrari, so he said, "Fuck it, I'm going to buy an M1." And that's the story. But
It wasn't actually better than Ferrari, financially speaking.
Correct,
Probably.
yes. But he's not a car guy at all. Like it wasn't like something he was really proud of. It wasn't like Nick Mason, his bandmate, who has every fucking car under the sun. It was just a car, and he's just like, yeah, like I was busy in the '80s. I drove it when I could, whatever. And so he owned this car since new and maintained it. He was obviously very successful even back then. So he had a family office and he had a guy to look after it. So this car has about 10,000 kilometers on it since new. But it's been maintained the entire time. So it's a completely original car. It lived its life in the UK at his house. And
it looks, from the pictures you sent me, man,
It's
it
mint.
looks new.
It's new.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And so he shipped the car he lives in the Hamptons, into the US this summer, to sell it with the idea of selling it. But he didn't want to deal with the auctions or the nonsense. He just wanted to find a guy that was easy and painless, and that ended up being me.
You were the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I was the guy.
And he bought the car when he was 39. I'm 39. He liked that. And it was just one of those things where it was like
You like music. He likes
Yeah,
music.
we both like music.
Yeah, you're an amazing. Is he a guitarist? I don't even know.
bass player and
Yeah.
guitarist. Yeah.
So you have that in common.
Exactly. Yeah. World renowned. And so we just ended up doing a deal, and I'm proud to say I have the car now.
So when is it ready?
So it's in the shop right now. We just have to replace all the rubber bits. But I think this spring for sure, very soon. I'm ecstatic.
I mean,
over this.
that car is just so enjoyable to drive. Like
It's
the thing,
amazing.
I don't know, like the. I mean, I can't. The sad thing about me is I have no kind of driving ability, no mechanical
Same,
knowledge.
clear.
Yeah, but to me, when I drove that car, the way it drove, the chassis, the suspension, the way it just handled itself, the way it was kind of forgiving but really exciting, all of those things.
Right.
And as you say, it's super easy.
It is, and I think like the cars that I tend to be drawn to are the cars that you can just drive around and go get milk, upstate or whatever,
Like
and
the
then,
XJ220.
just like that.
You know?
But when you step on it, they really explode. And so my 67S is completely docile, below 4,000 RPMs. But above that, it's a race car. And similar with the M1, even similar with the Ferrari, these cars are really very tame and almost kind of dull below, I'd say 4,000 RPMs. But that's great because then I can actually use them,
Right.
And the M1 is exactly that. So yes, it'll be ready very soon. I'm pretty excited. And I know you and I have goofed around about like the idea of like just cruising around neighborhoods with 2 M1s.
I mean, we should do that because it would be just amazing.
People would lose their minds.
Especially if we do it in the city, because then people ask you why you painted your DeLorean. The way that I get asked by cab drivers how I drive mine around the city.
That's too funny.
So you've got the M1,
Yeah.
all original untouched. You've got the 330,
Yeah.
you've got the Alfa SZ,
Yeah.
which is glorious. Oh, you've got that shit. You've got the bloody Porsche Zagato,
Yes.
which is glorious.
That's a neat thing.
That's very cool.
Wait, the what?
He's got.
Sure. So it's,
Are we not supposed to know?
No,
No.
it's fine. It was in the Wall Street Journal, so
Yeah.
it's
But other than
No
you
one,
and other
no
than-
one reads that anymore. Come on.
So it's a car. I had become really interested in Zagato cars, and I used to have a Ferrari 456. Was like the least expensive V12 Ferrari you could buy. And I was in Basel, Switzerland, where they do the big watch shows every year. And Zagato had an exhibition at a museum there. And I just sent a note and said, hey, I'm going to be there. Would love to see the exhibition. And they sent somebody from Milan to meet me to give me the tour. And my big idea was to take a 456 and have it rebodied by Zagato.
It's a good idea.
Oh, I didn't know that was
Yeah.
an idea.
Present day.
That's genius.
And they were just like, look, like it's really difficult to deal with Ferrari. They're a whole fucking thing. And it would cost you like €1 million. Like, do you want to pay that? And I was like, I can't pay that.
What?
Believe it or not. And
So
they
the change bowl, man, by the door.
Exactly. They said, however, we know you love Zagato. We know you love Porsche. We're doing this program, and there are 2 cars left in it. It's called the Sanction Lost. It was this idea of doing a 356 Zagato body in period 1959. They found a design that they made actually on September 11th, 1959, but they never made it. And so they said, we have the drawings. We're going to make 9 of these cars based on a 356B. Would you love one? And I said, of course, after we kind of, dealt with the financials of it. And so what's really neat is like as I started this conversation, just 20 minutes ago, I love the idea of coach-built cars, but the idea of having a coach-built car made today for me to my specifications is just amazing. And so that's why I did it. And a lot of people, that are really deep into cars say, "Oh, it's a recreation or whatever," but it's not. There was no such
Well,
thing.
there's no re part of it.
Correct, right.
Because it was never created in the
It
first
was never
place.
created. So this is kind of like the missing link between a Speedster and a GTL, the Abarth GTL. It's almost like a baby GTL. It is so beautiful and just so special. And I think of all the cars that I have, that's the one that will probably keep the longest, even though it's kind of like this bastard weird thing.
No, because it's a thing made for you.
Correct.
But the glory of that, man, is it's a thing made for you, but it's not like you went to Lamborghini and spec'd, leopard skin seats. It's this thing made for you from this time period where those things were exquisite, and it's got this beautiful design, but it's a fantastic thing.
It is, and it's weirdly one of the things that I own that I'm most proud of, because it represents me in such a great way. And again, like Porsche, like nobody here would deny like how great they are at making cars that are very usable. Like that car starts up every time without question, like no issues.
Right.
And better than a 911. The 4-cylinder, basically Volkswagen engine just kicks right up.
Right.
But you have this beautiful.
And it sounds insane. It sounds so good.
It sounds insane. Yeah. We have a Sebring exhaust on it. It's wild.
Are you going to do an exhaust on the? I'm a big fan of the exhaust change. Are you going to do that for the M1, or are you not sure?
I'm going to wait. I want to. So we talked about the velocity stacks, and if you take the airbox off,
right?
You know about this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to do that first to see if that gives me
non-invasive.
Yeah, non-invasive, exactly. And I can just put it right back on.
Right.
I would be reluctant because I think it sounds pretty good right now.
It sounds good when it's on cam.
Correct.
But when it's off cam, it's just kind of like,
I get it, but at the same time, like I want to use this car to go out to dinner and like go get milk and like use it as a very normal thing.
You don't want all the diners to hear you come.
Well, I remember following you in your M1, and I was in something else, I think my GT3. And flames were coming out the back, but not just like a burst. They were like, it was like a full-on stream of fire.
Full
out the
barbecue.
Back.
Full barbecue.
Exactly. I was like, is that supposed to be that way? And I don't think
That's factory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I probably will leave it, stock
It's
for now.
probably safe to say I'm a touch more hooligan.
A little bit.
But I mean, that's the thing I always feel like I change immediately. Every single car, I want it to sound, and it's so interesting how if you think about cars in the 90s and even in the 80s, they never considered sound design.
Correct.
Which is fascinating. Like the Shamal sounds like a Civic until I straight piped it, when then it sounds discernibly
and meanwhile,
better.
now BMW is piping in artificial
That's right.
sound. Yeah.
It's fascinating how they've sort of come around to this idea of designing sound where they paid no attention to it for years.
Yeah.
I mean, if it had a good sound, it was entirely accidental.
Yeah. I think the most egregious kind of offender in that capacity is the 456 Ferrari. That is a V12 Ferrari. Yeah. It sounds like a Civic. I mean,
I know. I remember driving yours, and
it
was kind of. It was like a full testicular implosion, not in the good way,
but it's
in a bad way.
Yeah,
it's a 2+2 grand touring situation.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
So comfort is.
Well, you're right. That they wouldn't want to make it all brappy
because you're going to put like your old lady in the back seat.
Correct.
And
your old lady. Was this the 1950s?
It is. Yeah. I'm saying.
Give me a ham sandwich.
Yeah, I'm going down to Broadway to pick up some dames. That's
right.
next.
But I mean, so that was the one instance where I did put on a Novatec exhaust and it changed the car completely.
Right.
I still wasn't in love with that car, and I ended up selling it when I got a GT3 Touring.
Why did you not?
I don't know. It was the idea, even though it was a very elegant, and I think it's one of the most beautiful Ferraris of the past 30 years.
I'm with you all the way on that.
It just didn't excite me that way. And then when I got an allocation for the GT3 Touring, I was like, I don't need two modern-ish GT-style cars. And the GT3 Touring is, I think, the best car as a driver.
You still have that?
No, I sold it.
Right.
I mean, this was a tragic mistake. About a year ago right now, I bought it new from a Porsche dealer.
Right.
He said, I'll give you what you paid for it, like cash tomorrow. We'll send a truck. It'll be there in 24 hours. That car's worth like 3.5 times what I sold it for now. But live and learn. It is what it is. But
I remember, it's funny because I remember what was I driving that we switched cars? I was driving something and then you said, I drove your 456 and you drove something else.
Maybe the Dino? Your little Fiat Dino that you had?
The Spider?
Yeah.
Maybe.
That might predate that.
But I remember feeling the same thing that you did, which was it felt weirdly. You know what it was? I didn't really feel connected.
Yeah.
Like it felt a little like I was floating in that car.
From a suspension,
which is probably what it's designed for.
It is. It was. As you said, it was supposed to be and it is a real GT. Like you can. I've put full-grown adults in the back of that car, and like they're happy.
You know, fully grown.
Just a few. Yeah. That car, as you suggested, is intended to be comfortable, but still, you buy a V12 Ferrari, like you wanna hear something,
right?
And the 330 GTC, which has a stock exhaust on, like you really do hear it,
right? So I remember I was thinking about you the other day, as I do often, usually in the shower with the loofah, but in this instance not. So about a year ago, I called you up and said, I'm going to go and look at a. You taking a selfie?
No, it's a picture of you.
Oh,
yeah. From my scrapbook.
For you, I called you up and said, I'm going to go and see Jaguar XJ220. Do you want to come with me?
Yes, I was there for that.
And I still remember. So it was probably 20 degrees, and the.
You know what? Can I interject?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was a year ago this week.
Oh, you're right. I think you're right. I think you're right. So it was 20-degree weather, super cold. We show up. The car's there.
Yes.
It's on original tires, I think it was.
Correct. Or at least 20-year-old
tires.
Yeah, race tires.
So I go for a drive in it. I drive. Tom takes me for a drive in it. Then I drive for about 10 minutes. I mean, no more than 10 minutes because I found and then I say, come back. I say, Ben, you get in it. Mm-hmm. You drive.
Terrifying.
Wait, who's Tom?
Tom Hale is the guy who sold me the car, who now has another business, but he's the loveliest person alive, and he knows endless amounts about cars. So he got me this. He sold me the 220. But so. Well, actually, when we were on the test drive, I said, "Oh, look, this is the kind of person he is." When we were on the test drive, I said, "Oh, there's a Burger King. We should go through the drive-through." And he said, "Yeah, why not?" Yeah. So we go through the drive-through in the 220, which is kind of fantastic. But then you got in the car and you drove it.
I did. Terrifying, truly terrifying. And I'm no Mario Andretti. Like I don't know what I'm doing. I just I love this for the fun of it. You know, it was one of the scariest things I've driven. Mostly because it was probably 20 degrees or colder. These tires were bald, effectively.
Yeah.
And this car hadn't been serviced in how long?
A long time.
A long time, right?
Yeah.
It's like, to be clear, this is like a very expensive car that neither of us own,
right? And
it was just like this is a high risk situation here.
So did you find the driving experience terrifying?
Well, once I got it into like third or fourth year, I felt okay, but it's just so big. It's so big. I'd never driven a car that long
all
before.
The time. So I'll tell you what though, which is funny, is that when you, at least for me, because in the interim of the 10 months it's been getting restored, whatever it is, I sort of built up the 220 to be this utterly terrifying thing.
Right.
In my mind, too big, too unwieldy, too I don't know, like just all these things. And so it got to the point where finally when he called me to tell me to get it, I sort of put it off by like a week or two because I was like, oh shit, I don't really know. I was really afraid that when you have a car that's that expensive, there's nothing worse than realizing you don't like it.
I'll say.
Because I want to ask you about that in a second. So I went up there finally, and I got in the car, and I just was and he said, let's just go around town. And after about 5 minutes, it didn't feel too big at all.
Right.
It was actually really, it's kind of easy to drive, but it's incredibly old-fashioned. Mm-hmm. Not in the way that old vintage cars are old-fashioned. It's a peculiar kind of old-fashioned because it's quite brutal, but it's also easy and comfortable.
Right. That's a V12, right?
V12 4-wheel drive scissor doors. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's an amazing car, and I think you and I joke all the time about like your influence on social media, which is real and I like
massive.
I mean, in some ways, it is.
Which ways? Can you? Why don't you just point to one way in which this fictitious influence is real?
Well, I mean, first of all, the Shamal is having a moment right now.
It is. I can't tell you how many people keep sending me articles about.
How many? Tell me how
4.
many. Yeah.
4
I can't believe how many writers you paid to write about that car.
I'll do the Trump method. A lot of people tell me the Shamal is a great car. No, 4 different articles in the last 2 weeks have been forwarded about the Shamal. So it's kind of gratifying to see that get some recognition. I was going to ask you something, but I've now forgotten.
Well, it was about buying a very expensive car
and not
then
liking
having
it.
a lot of regret.
Yeah. Have you ever had anything and then
The 456, not to keep kind of harping on that, would be the one that was like, oh man, like, I mean, like, I was the child of 2 teachers. Like growing up, like the idea of owning a Ferrari was just insane to me. And so when I finally bought that car, and it wasn't a crazy amount of money, like I really expected it to be like revelatory, and it just wasn't. It was just like, this is a cool car. When you really pushed it, it really was explosive, but it wasn't what I thought it would be. And then in another way, the GT3 Touring, which as I described as probably the best driving car I've ever owned or driven, it was too much. And so, like, that car is amazing for bombing at 140 miles an hour down some road in the middle of nowhere. But where I live, like, I can't use half the power. It's got 500 horsepower.
I don't want anything really with more than 300 horsepower.
What does the Jaguar have?
540.
What about the Shamal?
Yeah. Shamal's, shit.
What about the M1?
The M1's 286.
Yeah, 280.
Okay.
Like
knocking
the
on
Shamal
it.
is actually 326.
That's pretty good.
in period. I mean, who knows what it has now.
Yeah.
But you don't need to have, like, I've never understood the need for the massive horsepower situation because it does no one any good. You can't use any of it.
Correct.
It's just, and also it becomes, for me at least, because I'm so geezery, it becomes very terrifying very quickly.
It does. And I think like if somebody said you had to buy a new Porsche sports car today, it probably wouldn't even be a 911. It would probably be like a Cayman.
Right.
Those cars are spectacular, and it's got power you can use, and they're just fun, and they're half the price, and like nobody cares about them. You don't get the attention, which is a good thing for me. I think they're great cars.
You're very showy.
Extremely.
You're
showy,
very flashy, man. I mean, that's the funny thing about both cars and watches is that you can never. You can't try these things, and often you can't even see them. I mean, I've bought so many cars,
absolutely,
that I've never seen before, and I've certainly never driven before.
Yeah.
And then, so it's this kind of terrible. This is such a massive sort of 1% complaint, but it's this terrible fear that when the thing arrives, you're going to go, "Oh shit, this was a mistake."
Yeah,
especially if it's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I can say so. I bought the Ferrari with its engine out, with nothing functional on the car, and I had it kind of cleaned up in Italy, and then I went over there last September to drive it.
So were you worried that it wasn't going to be?
Well, I mean, the 330 GTC is a weird car because like the 330 GTs are real Grand Tours, and like they're not nimble at all. The GTC has the same chassis and transmission as the 275, which is a great place to begin, but like nobody really speaks of them as sports cars, you know? And so when I got in, I flew into Rome, and we finally got out of the traffic of Rome to really open it up. Around Rome, it really was not exciting.
Hang on. You were in the 330 in traffic in Rome?
Correct. The first drive was in traffic in Rome. Yeah,
that's the first time you ever drove it?
Correct, yes.
So were you just,
terrified. Absolutely
we're just only looking at the temp gauge?
Yes.
Only. Like, you didn't care about, you could.
So traffic in Rome, I'm sure probably both of you know, is significantly worse than anything in New York or anything that exists in the country because it's Italian, first of all. And like it's that city is just not set up for modern day traffic.
Sure.
And so everyone said you have to leave early, otherwise like this car will just explode basically. So we left at like 7 a.m. and it was okay getting out, but like I didn't get out of third gear until we hit the highway, outside of Rome.
But were the temps were all fine?
It was fine. That's
amazing.
Yeah. That car didn't not start once. The entire 1,000 miles I drove it around Italy when I picked it up. That car is automatic. I've
got to say, man, that seems to me like the best possible way to experience a car for the first time. I mean, it's a dream. Yeah. Like you pick it up in Rome and you drive it around Italy for how long?
For about 5 days. So, and the car.
And were you with the car at the time?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's glorious.
So
man.
that car lived in Rome from 1970 until still got the Roman plates on it, and it was still registered to the previous owner. We just cut kind of like a deal where like because basically like I wouldn't be allowed to register it because I didn't own it yet. There's a whole thing. So it had the original Roman plates. Driving around Rome, we went up to Tuscany. We went to
I mean, that must have been like being with Elvis.
It was wild.
Was it? I mean, people must just like streaming out of their houses.
Honestly, they were. I mean, it was a little embarrassing, to be honest with you. But the thing is, like, Italians are so proud of Ferrari. Right. I mean, really, like, genuine national pride for this car. It's not like in the U.S. where you see a guy in a Ferrari and like, oh, fuck you. Like, who is this guy? In Italy, they are genuinely proud that this company comes from their home country. So everywhere we went, it was just like people were pouring over it, just loving it. They wanted to know everything about it. It was extremely charming. It really was.
That's I mean, well, look, I've never really owned. All the cars I've ever owned have been in the States while I've owned them, but I've never the idea of kind of picking up a car like that in Italy and then doing a drive like that, especially with like someone you love with you in the car. And that's glorious.
I can't say enough good things about that. And then similarly, a trip that we went on together many years ago was Copper State 1000. Just the idea of doing like structured long distance driving in an old car away from your home is just magical. I mean,
well, there is something amazing. I mean. Were you did the one with was I in the Stratos?
Stratos,
And what were you in?
356.
Yeah, that's right. There's something amazing about like being in a hotel and then you walk out into the parking lot and you see your Stratos just parked in the parking lot, and then you turn the key and it starts, and you get in and you start driving.
Yeah. And parked next to it is a Gullwing, and besides that is a Speedster.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is what you want life to be like all the time.
Right.
No, it's I can't say enough good things about Copper State, and the idea of like structured drives in general, like it just allows you to see amazing things. I went to the Grand Canyon in the Flaminia. I mean, like think about that. Like,
did you?
Yeah, Copper State a few years later went north.
Okay.
It's just amazing. What an amazing way to see this country.
Also, because there's something really lovely about driving. The cars have become so kind of rarefied and precious and kind of hands off in the way in which we treat them.
Yeah.
That there's something glorious about. It is this thing that's extraordinary and beautiful, but it's also a thing I'm just using. Like, I get in it, I pull in somewhere, have lunch, go out to the parking lot, turn the engine, go off somewhere else. And that kind of the mundanity of that makes the thing more beautiful, I think.
It does, and I think it also, like, a very common comment on Hodinkee in our comment section is just rabid. It's wild.
Right.
Is that like if there's a watch that this commenter can't afford, they assume that person just puts it in a safe and never wears it. Meanwhile, like the greatest collectors I know in the world, the guys that have, say, a $30 million Phil Toledano, let's say multi-million-dollar collection, like they're wearing these watches every day.
Right.
And similarly, on the Copper State or anything like it, you see $5 million Ferraris being pushed.
Right.
And it's really common practice to do that. You just have to be comfortable with it.
I was having a discussion the other day with someone because we were talking. I can't remember.
Somebody famous?
Someone very famous. I was talking to Elton John. We were just texting about cars, as one does.
That's nice. I mean, he has an Android probably, so it's green, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, he has his assistant text me, but he's telling the assistant what to tell me. And we were talking about the idea of people who collect super low mileage cars and then don't drive them. I know, and it's it's hard when you're a person who likes to drive the cars not to look upon those people with a certain level of disdain. But then he was making a point there, and I can't really disagree with it. That everyone collects for different reasons,
Correct.
right? I mean, I admire the person who has a tuner car. Has just the same love and passion for cars as we do. It's just a different kind of budget, different kind of upbringing, different kind of aesthetic value. Mm-hmm. So, but it is hard when you see cars that have so little mileage and they're not driven. It's tough not to sort of be slightly judgy about it.
And I am certainly in that camp. And like I do love low mileage-ish original cars, but like it's about finding that sweet spot where like you can still feel good about driving it. But I do think there is a place for people that are out there to preserve, right? Because like they're not making any more original so-and-sos. And there's a great watch collector I know named Jason Singer, actually in Arizona.
He has old 964s with delivery miles.
Correct. Yeah,
that's right.
I mean, he is that guy. And so he buys new old stock everything. It could be the most insignificant reference of a Rolex or Patek, but if it's dead stock with box and papers, he'll buy it and I'll just put it away. And I've asked him about it at length, and he just says, I want to preserve history. I want people to know what these things look like out of the factory, and therefore I'm going to do this.
Well, you see, that's interesting because I've never heard that point of view. I just assumed it was some strange, like sort of low mileage fetish. But you're right, there is value in that idea because it's kind of cool to see things as they were, because everything has been touched at this point for the most part.
But that requires them to be able to be seen.
True.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Like, is he opening a museum?
Well, he did Talking Watches with me, which is kind of like that. But no, I mean, I think the idea of like a reference grade watch or reference grade car is interesting to me because, like, if let's say your Jag needed a restoration, like you would want. Isn't there a car out there that has like 15 miles? I think Canapa has it, right?
A 220?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, most of those 220s have
very low miles.
Yeah.
But I think Bruce Canepa has like a literal 15-mile car. Right. And let's say you needed to restore your car and you didn't know what the upholstery should look like. Like you go to that car, you could see that. So there is value in that for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let's talk a little bit about watches then.
Sure.
I know, you know what? For everyone who can't see, Ben has this Ura Sleep Ring. Now he made me. It tracks your sleep habits. He made me get one.
I made you.
He made me get one against my will. He coerced me. He said it was going to be out of the will if I didn't get one. I got one, and then what happened for the next 2 months? You'd be like, you text me screenshots of your incredible sleep scores.
That's what I do. I'm a great sleeper.
And then my sleep score was shit every time. Yeah. And you'd be like, yeah, look, I got a 96, and I go, oh, I got a 43, and so I had to get rid of it because I had sleep rage.
The Ura Ring, and I'm not an investor. I'm not paid. Like I really believe this could be a life-changing device for so many people.
Really,
sleep is the final frontier of healthcare. It really is. And I think if you,
Captain Kirk,
we won't spend too much time on this, I promise. But the days that I have a glass of wine or two, whatever, before I go to bed, and the days where I go to bed early in a cold environment, whatever, I wake up the next day feeling so much different. And this just allows me to track that, and so it allows me to kind of fine tune how I live my life.
Yeah, but how do you? But the thing is, though, what do you do with the data? All that data told me when I had that bloody ring was I was a miserable sleeper, which I knew that. I've known that for years.
So wait, who owns that data?
That's a good question.
Ben does.
Yeah, I do. Exactly.
He owns all my sleep data.
I don't know, to be honest. I would imagine that there's some privacy thing there. But for what I use it for is if I get below an 80, I want to say, okay, what did I do yesterday that didn't feel good to me? Did I go out? Did I stay up too late? Did I have a
take Molly and go rave? Maybe it was that, probably not.
But it really has allowed me to be, as somebody that is at sometimes shockingly busy and I'm really trying to do so much. I just want to know that I'm operating the best I can. And I'm not working out a lot, obviously, but this is one way to be a slightly better version of myself.
Right. Is there any need? I mean, I thought you were always peak best version of Ben Clymer.
I'm trying.
I remember a few, maybe a year ago or something, we were talking, and you said, I said, are you selling any watches and stuff? And you said to me that you were just only going for modern stuff. And
it's true.
And I was like, that's bullshit. Of course. What do you know? Hodinkee founder guy. And you were completely right about the
every
way.
Now and then.
About the way that, did you know then that the market was taking this swing, or it's just?
No, I don't know anything, but I can see stuff, and I see the sentiment in our comments, and I see what I'm myself interested in. And look, I'm wearing a modern watch today, but I still love vintage watches. And if you show me a great 6263 box papers or 6240, I would be excited by that. What? Oh boy, yeah. You and Rihanna, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I know.
I know.
We talk.
Yeah.
Well, wait. So just so people that aren't watching know, what did you just point at?
So I have a Rolex. Well, this is a Midas Cellini from the 70s, and Rihanna was just about a month ago or something. She was photographed wearing a version of this watch, and so now it's become sort of a source of comedy, of course.
Indeed.
But so I found that staggering that because I have no. It's funny. I'm I can see the beauty of the modern stuff. I look at FP Journe and I keep trying to persuade myself that I can't persuade myself into liking them. I look at FP Journe and I can totally see the cohesive design, the aesthetic thing that he's created that runs across all the watches. Mm-hmm. And the craftsmanship, all that stuff, but it doesn't do anything for me. And I find a lot of modern stuff. I can't wear modern things for some reason.
Why?
It reminds me of my mortality. I don't know. And this is so stupid and so dumb and so cliche, but I feel I like the sense of history that old things have acquired.
Yeah, I completely get that. And the cars that I lust for the most are old cars. And at the end of the day, most of the watches that I think are the most beautiful and most special as objects are vintage, no question about it. But my collecting has changed from, when I was starting Hodinkee into when it was becoming, whatever it is now. I wanted to experience everything and I wanted to own everything. And that meant just amassing a collection. And then I was like, you know what? I've kind of done that. And now all I want are watches that mean something to me.
Right.
Sincerely. And like the reason that I'll keep the 356 above all the other cars is because that car means something to me. It was designed by me.
So how does that work in the context of modern watches? Do you buy one when something great happens?
Sometimes.
To celebrate our friendship. 2015, you bought a watch.
Exactly.
You bought an Hublot Big Bang to celebrate our friendship.
The idea is that, sometimes it is like a moment in time, and sometimes it is just relationships I have with people. Like the CEO of A. Lange & Söhne is a genuinely good friend of mine, and I think he makes the best watches in the world. Truly. And so when he does something special, I would love to have one of those. When we do a big deal at work or whatever, there are moments for sure. And to me, it's like those are the watches that will mean something to my future children, much more so than like the 2526 white that I've had for 6 years and I haven't worn in the past 3 because it's worth too much money now.
Right.
And so for me, it is that. But I think there are ways to get things that are really, really special that are modern. Like I got a Roger Smith about a year ago. I ordered it 5 years ago, but got it last year, genuinely. And like that is one guy.
The market has done incredible favors for you in the 5 year waiting period.
Truly. And he's actually stopped taking orders on new watches now. I think there are really special things still made today. And I think, again, of like the things that were around.
Are you talking about the independents or are you talking about?
Well, I mean, look, I think Lange, which is owned by Richemont, which is a publicly traded company, is not independent, but I think they are making special things. I think a Rolex is special. I think Omega is special at times. For me, it means a lot more. Like this is the 50 Fathoms that we design. Like this means something to me. Like I love the 50 Fathoms. This is our take on it.
You've been doing some fantastic collaborations. Hodinkee has.
I noticed you haven't bought any of them.
You know what, man? It's so funny.
Are you checking the customer purchased it? Yeah. Oh, where's
Phil? Phil? No, Phil. Well, it's funny because it goes back to that thing of modern watches.
I get it.
But having said that, I do wish that I had bought that Ressence. Because I have this thing for Ressence. You know what it is? I feel like I'm not a keen fan of modern watches, but I do like the idea of pieces that feel. I guess I would say the independent stuff. But
I get that.
Because it feels, I guess, more like art in some way.
And it is.
And there's more soul involved, I guess.
Question.
Because it's the creator's hands are directly involved in making this thing. Yeah. So I guess that but also I feel like I've sort of slightly missed the boat on a lot of those independent people. Although I am sorry, go on.
No, please.
I've joined. I think I told you this. I joined some indie WhatsApp group and chat, and I'm sort of surprised at how much stuff people seem very excited about, I find really terrible. And so I'm not sure if it's me or everyone else.
Well, it's different. I mean, we've talked about this briefly, but there's so many really wonderfully made and designed watches. And when I say design, I don't mean aesthetics. I just mean like the engineering of it, that are horrible looking. I mean, really horrendous.
Right.
You know? And a lot of those independents fall under that category. Everyone's are into it for different things. And it's like the difference is, let's take myself and Jack Forrester, right? Like I'm a watch collector. Like I care about collecting. I write about collecting and the culture of it. Jack writes about watch making. He has no idea what reference is more desirable than the other, and he doesn't pretend to.
Right.
He does know exactly how it's made, and he knows how it's finished, and what a chamfer is different, versus X, Y, and Z. And like we both love watches equally, and I think like that kind of defines what collecting of anything is. Like these guys that buy the Urwerks and the MB&Fs, which are like incredibly made watches, but visually weird. They're into it for a very different reason than probably you.
Yeah,
and
but
I
I feel, what's interesting, but when people on this thread talk about those watches, they talk about them from an aesthetic point of view for the most part.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that eludes me is I look at them and I go, I'm not sure aesthetically how that works.
How it resolves, yeah.
Yeah, like it's like I feel like a lot of those things are they're sort of 70% designs. Like they're 70% good and then the rest kind of falls off, so it's not quite all there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit like driving a Pagani, right? Like you understand why a Pagani is what it is. You understand why it's $3 million, why it's all carbon fiber and stuff hanging out. But like, and you realize that like that probably would bring you a lot of joy as a driver if you wanted to go really fast. But as an owner, it's like I have to look at this thing every day, and like you can't appreciate the craftsmanship of all these brands. But you still have to look at it.
But that's the peculiar thing because people talk about Paganis with this glowing adoration in terms of and I keep looking at it going. Look at the typefaces from a Windows font from 87.
It is. Yeah.
Like, what's happening with that thing?
I don't know them at all, but I would imagine they just care about performance above all else.
I don't think that's true at all, though. I feel that with Pagani in particular, the thing is, you can see, at least to me, it seems very clear that he pays attention to every single thing aesthetically.
Except for?
except for it doesn't look that great.
I mean, according to you.
According to me.
Right.
And I know that I'm sure I'm in a minority, and there's plenty of people who like those things.
I don't think you are in the minority. I think you're in the majority, and I think the minority are the people that A, can afford it, and B, find it visually, kind of compelling. Did you see the Gordon Murray, the new T33?
Yes.
That's an interesting car.
Wait, is the T33 what's the one with the giant fan in the back?
That's the T50.
The 33 was much nicer looking.
Much nicer.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, like when I saw that, I was like, wow, if I could afford this, I would buy this car. Because, yeah, exactly. Because that makes all other supercars look silly, right?
Well, it does, because it's an exercise in restraint.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
You're exactly right.
And it's a 6-speed transmission. It's a 2-seater, not a 3-seater.
Right.
It's a supercar that, like, it's all the horsepower. Like, he could have pushed that thing out to 1,000 horsepower.
Sure.
Certainly. Chose not to, And
I think, what is it? Like 800 or something?
I think, do you remember?
I don't. It's 1,000 less RPM though on that
Yes.
Cosworth V12.
Right.
That part I remember.
But you're right though. That's actually a really interesting point, because it's a beautiful exercise in extraint. Because what I feel is that there was this point in the last 10 years where, like, do you remember like the Gumpert Apollo, and like people were just making, and every new Lamborghini iteration just seems to be an exercise in adding more and more vents and scoops and wings and making it more like the Batmobile than the original. I mean, the original Batmobile looks tame compared to stuff that we have now.
It does. But I think what Gordon did with the T33, and like genuinely, like when I spent more time looking at that car than I spent on any other car in the past few years. And I really would have bought it if I could. And that car, to me, really does make all those supercars look silly, because it's pure. It's a 6-speed transmission. It's what you really, really want. To me, it's the Roger Smith of modern supercars. Like, you're kind of done after that. And like for me, I have the Roger Smith. Like, I don't know that I need another time-only watch ever, because I have the guy that like, worked with the best watchmaker in the world, George Daniels, make a watch by hand. And I think that is what I hope will lead to change at the big companies. Like, the fact that you can't buy a manual Ferrari today it's crazy. It's completely crazy.
Right.
And I think that has to change. And I think it actually might, because we've seen the pickup rate of like all the GT3s now. I think it's like 70% of them are
How are you going to make a manual electric?
Well, that I don't know. That's not my job.
That's somebody else's problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's your problem.
I don't know if you know, I'm developing a manual Ferrari.
I had a feeling.
I don't like to talk about it. I'm actually I think I've talked about this. I'm designing a watch with a friend of mine in Hong Kong right now.
You have friends in Hong Kong?
Well, one. Two. And
What's
a
it
friend
called?
is loosely.
What's it called?
I don't know. I was trying to think of that. We've been trying to think about what the brand name would be.
Should we crowdsource it on Instagram?
I'm all for it, man. But it's just, because everything, I think, like, I feel like I think you either have to have, I'm kind of in favor of having something that's a little like an empty vessel that doesn't mean something necessarily.
It's just a thing.
It's just a word.
Yeah.
Because I feel like often people choose names. I mean, MB&F is actually not a bad thing.
Max Booster and Friends.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I actually really love, what's he called? Like the Legacy Machine?
Yeah.
It sounds so H.G. Wellsy.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
So our first limited edition ever was Legacy Machine 101. We did one in steel with a green dial.
Did you?
Yeah. That was our first LE ever.
Oh, LE.
Yeah.
Oh,
that stands for limited edition.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. So yeah, it's been well. First of all, it's been very interesting designing a watch with.
Sure.
I mean, with this guy.
Is it blank slate? Like you're starting from nothing?
Yeah. I mean,
there's no foundation, there's no movement or anything like that?
No, we just started from scratch with the design.
Got it.
But what we're doing is basically my whole thing is that I'm been very interested in, as you may or may not know. I don't know if you're aware, but I'm very interested in 1970s stuff. There's
couches.
I love
mostly couches.
Mostly couches, but occasional watches.
Yeah.
I feel like the 70s was this peak. It was peak audacity for design. And
Agreed.
It's been kind of obscured by like the polyester flares, open neck shirt sort of vision. I find that actually very interesting. That's a larger point, how mythology obscures things.
Sure.
Do you know? I mean, that happened to the M1 actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a long time, it was kind of. What do you remember? What the mythology was for the M1?
Well, it was designed to compete with, I think, the 935. I think it was Group 4.
Yeah, and then by the time it was ready, it was too late.
Correct. And Group 4 rules had changed, et cetera. And then they did the Pro Car series because they had built all these cars but didn't really have anything to race, so they were just racing themselves.
Right.
Yeah, there was, and the Jag as well, the XJ220. Kind of got a bad rap there for a minute.
Well, because it was launched as it was supposed to be ostensibly one thing, then it was not that thing, and then there was the economic crisis of the early '90s, and then it kind of disappeared, and people hated it.
Yeah, but I mean, those are the things that are like, you know, as a one-time journalist, like those are the things that are compelling to me, like things that have stories, and like, you know, an outright win is not that compelling. Something that like really struggled to kind of gain traction is far more interesting to most people.
You know what else is like that?
Tell me.
The Shamal.
Go on.
Allow me to elucidate, my friend. Well, because
Hold on, I'm looking at the stock prices of Shamals right now.
Yeah.
It's surging, man.
Surging, going up.
What's that Blue Endicott says? So, well, because, okay, there's a car. I find it really interesting to kind of look past the obscuring mists of false mythology, because there was a car that got sort of lumped in. Maserati in the 80s wasn't the finest moment, right? And so it got lumped into the kind of the whole biturbo shittiness.
Right.
And it turns out that it's not that car at all. It's a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, I mean, I keep saying this to people endlessly, but I feel like that's one of the nicest cars. Have you ever driven that car yet?
I haven't driven it, but I've sat in it outside my office.
And you fell asleep immediately because it's that comfortable.
But that was when Bradley broke your cup holder?
Break, which he denies. See, that we got into a tiff over that.
But you guys are good now.
Everything's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, until he breaks something else and denies it. So, I think how long is this? How long have we been blathering for?
Oh, for a good minute. But I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, obviously, we know you wore the Midas watch in the hopes that Rihanna will see you on the street, which I don't blame you.
I mean,
Yeah, I get it.
A guy could try.
You're gonna have to co-parent with ASAP, but it's fine. But wait, so can you tell us more about the watch you have on today?
Sure. Yep. So this is 50 Fathoms. We did. When did we do this? 2020, probably. 50 Fathoms. You know, arguably the archetypal kind of a modern dive watch, like similar kind of vintage to the Submariner. Really came out the same year. And in many ways, to me, is equally compelling to a sub. And this is our second project with them. And it was one of those things where we designed a 50 Fathoms with a case that currently existed in 2018 or so. And we really didn't know what to expect, but I mean, blew it out of the water. Like sold like 100 units in like 8 minutes or something like that. And so we wanted to kind of anniversary it in a way with doing something that felt a little bit more in line with, if I can be honest, like that project was kind of like thrown together in some way. And this project was something we really designed from the ground up with a brand new case, brand new dial, brand new hands, brand new bezel. Like it's a totally new watch. The movement's the same, obviously. And so this is something that I just enjoy as somebody that was involved with the creation of it. And like a little bit different than Phil, like I love kind of working and problem solving with these mega brands, these giant brands that are so fucking painful to deal with. It's truly outrageous. And figuring out a way to make it work. And then also beyond that, like validating this idea that like this little blog that I started, 10, 14 years ago can sell. We sold 250 of these in I think 6 minutes at $15,000 each. And we probably have a waiting list of like 1,000 people. And so it just changes this entire industry's idea of what the internet is. And there's a story that I've told elsewhere many, many times, but it's completely true. In 2000, we'll say 9 or 10, I was meeting the CEO of one of the most famous luxury brands on the planet. He was an older guy. And the publicist said, "Oh, this guy's got a blog, whatever." And he told me,
OnlyFans.
Yeah, exactly. He told me that he felt that the internet was for poor people. That is a direct quote.
What?
I swear to God.
For poor people?
For poor people.
Does he know what internet speed costs?
In 2009, in Switzerland, this was actually in Paris, actually. He just had no idea that people would be consuming his products, some years later on our sites and others. And like I can't blame him because like he was probably born a millionaire, he died a millionaire, like he just lived his own little world. But what I think I'm most proud of with Hodinkee beyond the community is just like validating that like the internet and like there's a democratic world out there for luxury items. And like we are not a luxury watch platform at all. Like when we almost had to fire a recruiter because he went out and said this is a luxury watch platform. I was like, this isn't about luxury at all. This is about like enthusiasm. This is about caring about something. And so, the idea that we can convince a brand like Blancpain, which is owned by Swatch, which is one of the biggest groups in the world, to do something like this is part of the fun. I remember when we did our Leica collaboration, we sold out those. It was like a $15,000 camera. Ted Gashu sent me a text. He's like, "Wow, dude, it took you 3 years to make a white camera." And I was like, "You have no idea what it actually takes to get Leica to do anything."
Well, to do in particular a white camera.
Yeah, it was actually gray, but we call it ghost.
But wait, so you guys also did a camera?
We did, yeah.
So that's not a watch.
It's not a watch.
interesting.
Yeah, and we kind
You've done some. Didn't you do the Mark Newsom?
we didn't. Yeah, we did two things with Mark. We did a pen where he did a pen for Mont Blanc that we designed with him, and then we did an hourglass that Mark.
What was that
Newsom
like
designed.
working with him? Because I'm a massive Newsom. For people
He's
who don't
amazing.
know, Mark Newsom is an amazing Australian industrial designer.
He is.
He's done a lot of stuff, but he horologically speaking, did the Icopod, which I love.
He did an Atmos for Jaeger,
Yeah.
and a few other things. The Apple Watch. I mean, he did a good chunk of the Apple Watch as
Yeah.
well. I mean, he's part of the tribe. Like he fully gets it, and he's amazing to work.
You know
with.
what's lovely about Hodinkee, if I have to say something complimentary, if I'm obliged to, is that you've kind of democratized nerdy enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And that's glorious because I am a massive nerd. And the thing
same.
about nerd, and yeah, as you are too, and the thing about nerdery is that it's kind of, it means disappearing down specific wormholes attached to specific things like a watch or a car or a chair or whatever. And I feel like that's a lot of what you guys have done.
Yeah, I think that is ultimately what I'm most proud of. And then like the last part of the sentence that you were just saying is like, and then connecting with people that share the similar type of passion. And I think that is what has made Hodinkee so successful. And like the videos that we did in the early days with John Mayer and Aziz Ansari, it's like these are genuinely cool, interesting people that also happen to be nerds about this. And then
and Phil Toledano.
We did do one with you.
Oh my God, I like that. Oh, did we? I'm not sure.
I actually really did forget about that.
Is it still uploaded?
I'm trying to forget about that.
They've taken it down.
Yeah.
They took it down. There
they-
was a lot of vitriolic commentary.
No, it's this idea that like, I grew up as a pretty like insular, quiet, conservative kid that like didn't really know how to express himself. And like, had I seen a video of Aziz Ansari, who I admire, say that I love this watch and I bought this watch for my parents the first time I sold at Madison Square Garden, I'd say, you know what, like, okay, my feelings about watches are now validated because somebody that I respect does that. And I think we do a good job with that. And I think we will continue to, for sure.
I mean, a lot of the old school collectors are kind of mad that you brought the hobby out of the basement.
Yeah. And
It's interesting because I've had so many conversations with people collecting for 30, 40 years, and they're kind of upset that it's been exposed to the light.
Yeah,
it's almost like they were roaches. And
it's gatekeeping. It's this
Right, it is
idea
gatekeeping.
that if like this is mine and I'm keeping people
It's
away
very
from it.
it's very Gollum-y.
Yeah, it is. But meanwhile, like the greatest collectors in the world, the John Goldbergers, who was actually our second or third talking watches ever, right? Like he's embraced it full stop. And
Right.
and there are so many other people like him that we haven't done videos.
Well,
with
that's
that have
admirable.
embraced
That
this.
just demonstrates an admirable elasticity of mind, which I respect.
I think like the old
Rolex.
school Rolex.
Rolex. No one says Rolex like John Goldberger.
The old school guys that like complain about Hodinkee and sites like ours are remind me a lot of the Swiss guys that say the internet is for poor people. It's like they're
Right.
just not like this is reality. It's like
Sure.
get with it or not. And I think what we did a good job with Hodinkee is like a lot of this culture existed on forums before, but that was really inward facing. And we said like let's broadcast it, like let's put it out there and let's get John Mayer to talk about a 6263 Big Red and 5970G.
But you didn't
P.
even mean to do that.
No,
But this is what's so glorious about Hodinkee, man. I mean, it's kind of like just to toot my own horn, but like Viva Bastardo
Mhm.
was never intended to be a giant exercise in like a lifestyle brand.
And that's what it is now. Giant.
It's huge. I mean, LVMH
massive. Yeah.
calling me all the time. Can we have a part of the company? But look, I know that I'm just a tiny,
No.
but it is. It's a small, Viva Bastardo is a small, tiny thing.
For now.
But it started just because it was from something I love, and it became accidentally something much bigger than me. And it's exactly the same with Hodinkee. And I find that that's the purest articulation of business in a way.
It is, and not to kind of get off the car and watch thing, but I'm starting a golf business as well, which is whatever. But like we're starting from ground zero, and like I'm starting with a guy named Adam Scott who has won the Masters, like a professional golfer, and we were like, hey, should we pull all of our favors and get the press to talk about it? Should we get all the big LVMHs or whoever to invest in it? And we decided, you know what, like this needs to feel earnest. This needs to feel like it is mom and pop, which it is,
Well, it's a thing. It's coming from a thing you really love.
Exactly. And I think, a lot of times, like if we went out and launched what we're launching in a few weeks or a few months, and we got coverage all over the world, and we had 100,000 followers on day one, and Lady Gaga's talking about it, like which
She's
is
a huge golfer.
Well, she's a watch ambassador, which is crazy.
Right.
Tudor ambassador. It just wouldn't feel genuine. And I think like we want to feel exactly what this product is based on, which is exactly passion.
I almost feel like this is a whole. I wonder if this is a very common business model.
What's that?
Like like accidental success from a thing you love.
I think it happens. I don't think it's that common. And I think we would both admit like a lot of it is right place, right time, and knowing the right people. But if if you love it, then obviously people are going to spend more time on it. But it's hard, man. And like there were years where I didn't care about watches at all. In fact, I disliked watches. You know, I would say like 2016 through 18 for me was really, I was just like, I'm over it. You know, like I had given up too much of my own real life.
It's true, actually. I remember when I used to send you pictures of watches, like, it was so funny. That actually was totally depressing. I'd send you pictures of things I'd like. You're like, oh yeah, I had one of those 4 years ago. I'm not in. Yeah, it's great. It's nice. It's nice. And there'd be like a virtual pat on the head.
No,
and I go thinking, what can I buy that Ben has not seen yet?
Well, I've never owned one of those.
For good reason, probably.
I think those are cool, and I appreciate that. Like now, all of a sudden, people are paying attention to things that they weren't before,
right?
Which is great.
Right,
it's a great thing, and like this industry needs to keep pushing forward via people like you and platforms like ours. Otherwise, it just dies. It just becomes stagnant.
Going back to that business thing, it is true though. You can tell, and I think what you did was smart with your golf thing. That you can tell when it's love and when it's not.
Of course,
it's weird because how can you tell? But people just can,
well,
right?
It's like when somebody like really wants to talk to you at a cocktail party versus somebody that's like looking around the room looking for like, you know, the hot chick or the rich guy or whatever.
Right.
Like you can tell that, right? It's no different than that. Like the
so.
way that you post on Instagram, the way that we shoot these videos that we're doing now with Adam Scott, it's just like it's born out of like we just want to share this stuff.
Do you want to talk about? No, you don't.
Is this the right audience for that?
Well,
I mean, I'm a huge golfer. You know
I had no idea you were into golf.
Yes. Big golfer.
What's your handicap?
It's like a 6.
I have no idea what that means.
It's like pretty good. Like not great, but
what's
like
good. Is that out of 10?
I think it's out of 36. I think
so
the
36 is good or 1 is good?
0 is ideal. Then you can get into plus. So like you actually have to like add strokes to your score to get to par. That means you're really good.
So a champion golfer would be like what?
Well, I play with Adam, who is a champion golfer, and he usually beats me by 20 strokes. Yeah, on 18 holes.
I want to make some jokes here, but so is his handicap like plus 10?
It would be like probably plus 10 if we were plus 8 to 10. Something
so
like that.
6 is pretty good. How long have you been playing?
So I grew up playing. When I was the same guy who gave me my Omega also taught me to play golf, and then I stopped in high school and college, and then through the Hodinkee years.
Right.
And then when I had some money and some time, I said, let's get back into it. And then when Adam and I became good friends, it was like, okay, I need to be good at golf because I'm friends with this guy. And he invited me to play after years of not playing, and I was just like, I just can't. And we had played at this place called Winged Foot, which is like a very famous golf course.
That must be high pressure.
It really was. It really, really was. And I was like, I just can't go out there and embarrass
ball around
myself.
with the foot and all that kind of
Trump style.
Yeah, Trump style.
Wait, is Winged Foot I think they had an event there last year.
US Open, yeah.
Yeah. And like the course is fucking bananas.
Yeah, it's a big deal for sure. And so he invited me to play there for my first time ever. And like when Adam is at a golf course, like the crowd will gather around. Like, you know, it's like seeing Michael Jordan shoot hoops.
Oh, so everyone's watching you.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Oh, that sucks.
It did suck. But I played pretty well, and he's still my friend, which is good. Yeah.
So do you want to tell us what the idea is?
Yeah. So Fair Game is, in some ways, it's the idea of democratizing golf, which like it really needs it. Like I look at golf, and it reminds me of watches 15 years ago. Like rich white guys run the entire fucking thing. Like if you're not a wealthy guy, or even if you are a wealthy guy and don't know the right people, like you're just cast aside. And so what we want to do is very much the same thing that we did with Hodinkee, which is like democratize the idea of being interested in it. So we shot a video series, we're calling it Swing Thoughts. The first episode was with Kelly Slater, the surfer, greatest surfer of all time. He's a scratch golfer. He's amazing. We just did a video today with a guy named...
What's a scratch golfer?
That means like you're at 0, basically.
Okay.
Like you're very, very good. Like Kelly Slater could be a pro golfer if he really committed to it. Steph Curry is really into it. Tom Brady. You know, very well-known people are really into it. So we want to do the exact same thing we did with Talking Watches, which is like, hey, like Kelly Slater, who's the man, is really deep into golf. Like it's okay for you to be into it too. And then more things will kind of come down the road. But it's very much the same idea of just like sharing a passion for like a really dorky thing on the internet. And I think I'm good at that. So we're doing it.
That's fantastic. And when does it launch?
So we launched the first video with Kelly in January of this year. And then there's a video with me, which, you know, everyone's so excited for. And then
can only imagine.
Exactly. And then we're doing one with Freddie Couples, who's another Masters winner, and then other famous people down the road.
And how was the reception to the Kelly video?
100,000 views, you know, which we started from 0. I mean, Kelly is a very famous person, which helps. You know, so far so good. And the feedback is positive, but we have a long way to go.
What's the structure on a video like that? Because on Talking Watches, clearly you have people talking about the watches.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that.
I've heard.
I'm not sure if you're aware of what those videos entail.
So this is Adam is the host, and Adam is famous for having one of the most beautiful and perfect golf swings ever, truly. And so we call it Swing Thoughts, and you go up there and you say, he'll say like, "What do you think about when you're over the ball?" And you get these incredibly dorky, kind of twisted ideas, like what goes through your head right before you swing the club, and it's just super endearing.
I mean, I would imagine. I mean, look, as a huge sportsman myself, I would imagine that. Are you thinking about anything when you're about to hit the ball?
So
isn't it like some sort of Zen moment of no thought at all?
So the answer is for me, it is that way. But other people are like, okay, I need to keep my back straight. I need to keep your head down. And so there's just even Adam or Tiger or any of the great golfers, like it's just a never ending stream of trying to get better.
Right.
And so when you find these things like Kelly, who is the greatest surfer of all time and a scratch golfer, like he has crazy fucking ideas going through his head about swing planes and like balancing left and right. It's wild. And it's just really endearing because you see this guy that is, this world champion just be a dork about golf. And to see that happen at scale, I think will be really compelling.
God, that's so interesting, man.
It's a little bit like, it's a little bit talking watches for sure. It's a little bit like comedians in cars getting coffee, but it's this idea of serializing this concept. Like there are great golf videos out there already and, instructive stuff, but like getting good at golf is not that fun, but playing golf with your friends is really fun. And that's what I love about it for sure. And I think these videos will say like, hey, like Kelly played golf, you guys should go out for the weekend and goof around and go do it. So we'll see. But who knows? I mean, like this could be the next Hodinkee for me, or this could be like a fun little project. But either way, I'm happy to be doing it.
So are there other things that you're thinking about doing, projects or?
I mean, so I'm still involved with Hodinkee, and it's still very much. I mean, I was there before. I'll go back there right now. It's still very much a big part of my life professionally, and I think it will be for a long time. So that and fair game is enough for me for sure.
And then Viva Bastardo.
And then Viva Bastardo as cultural ambassador. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's right, cultural ambassador.
Yeah, that's right. So when are you going to raise money for Viva Bastardo, or have you already?
No.
This is what he's doing right now.
Yeah, this is what this is. This is what this is. Yeah. I'm setting up a GoFundMe. I think we just throw that up at the end of the podcast.
The thing is, you would make real money doing that. People would invest. I guarantee it.
I mean, you know me, man. I mean, I have no shortage of ideas, and I can just see the Viva Bastardo world and how I can expand that outwards. I'm not especially good at the business aspect of things.
Is that so?
I know that's shocking. It's shocking. I know you think I have a ruthless business mind. You often consult me.
He's paying us to do these podcasts.
Yeah. There is actually no podcast. It's Hagerty with an I at the end. It's a totally different brand.
The thing, if I may say, and I've said this to your face, so this is not news, like you should put out a call on this episode or another that says, I'm looking for like a business-minded intern or assistant or head of BD or CEO, whatever grade you want to pay for.
Yeah.
And like, that's all you need. Like you are truly, like you have the ideas in spades, obviously. But then, like, you just need somebody to make it all happen. And I think, ideas, your ideas are special, no question about it. But, like, ideas are fucking cheap. Like, that is not a business. We all know that. Like, people learn that too late. It's all about execution.
No, I know. I mean, that's the thing I've learned is that, I have no shortage of ideas, but it's weaponizing the ideas, monetizing the ideas, making them functional entities. That's where it all lies. So, that's exactly. No, I know. You're right. And I should probably, well, why don't we end the podcast on that note? Anyone who's interested in being CEO of Viva Bastardo, please get in touch with me. I'm happy to chat with you.
The phones are already ringing.
They're off the hook. But I just want to say, Ben, thank you so much for coming, man. It's been such a joy having you here. Really enjoyed it. And, good luck with Fair Play.
Fair game.
Fair game.
Bro.
Shit. Sorry, man. I like good luck with hole in one. I hope that all works out for you.
No. It's been a pleasure. And as always, Phil, it's great to see you and you as well.
Yeah.
Whatever your name is.
Mystery Matt.
That's right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Ben.
Pleasure.